Hey Enneagram friends, I'm Abby, an IEA accredited Enneagram coach and certified somatic practitioner. Today on the podcast, I share the coaching space with an Enneagram 9, and I can't wait for you to hear our coaching conversation. We explore the deep desire for both peace and autonomy that shows up in the Type 9 structure. She shares the experience of kind of digging in her heels when others are pushing or pulling her, but also the internal desire to not have such stubborn boundaries with others. We explore the too muchness and the overwhelm that's often felt in the Type 9 structure, and how we can support ourselves so that we don't instantly collapse or hide when we feel swept away in the undertow of others. In our coaching conversation, we give some language to the felt sense of boundaries and the overwhelm so that we have some more awareness of our experience in real time. I hope you'll listen in with curiosity and see what resonates in your experience. So what's on your mind as we come into the coaching space? What feels most helpful for us to explore during our time together?
There is a thing that immediately popped into my head. And at first I thought it was two different things. But I think they're actually one intertwining related thing. So
Yeah.
kind of my whole life, but especially lately, it's become a little more acute. I struggle with this idea of, or I guess desire for independence. I find myself being stubbornly adamant about being independent. And the way that mixes with kind of my peace seeker qualities. I find myself, especially in romantic relationships, being very deferential, which then gets people kind of, I guess I don't know for sure if this is what happens, but my theory is that it gets people into a habit or a pattern of then kind of making decisions for me, because when they ask, I will often say I don't care, whatever you want to do, whatever you think. But that piece of allowing me to have the opportunity to kind of allow the other person to take control is so important to me, because once that starts happening, I start to push back quietly and, without a lot of loud conflict, but very stubbornly. I push back and try to reclaim my independence.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think many nines would resonate with you, and you would be in very good company if they were all sitting in a group with you. Because I think so much of what you're describing is, nines are in that body triad. So there's this deep desire for autonomy, for independence, for those things to be respected, right? And almost feeling not like respect and love are equal, but it feeling like part of that showing of love is respecting autonomy and independence. But then it feels like this internal conflict that happens in the Type 9 structure of desiring for there to be ease and things to be, kind of this flow of give and take. But then in an effort to create that peace, it's a lot of just give and let it go. And it's not a big deal and it's okay. And so it, for all the 9 types, there's kind of this internal conflict that feels so contradictory of I need my independence, but then I also feel very okay saying yes to whatever you're wanting to do or offering. And in that, there becomes kind of this, I often call it the silent stubbornness of, I do not want to do the things you are telling me to do. But it also feels so hard to say that fully out loud, because it feels like it will erupt into this big disconnection or this big argument or whatever it might be that's kind of harming the opposite of harmony. So even as I kind of share that back, what lands in your experience and what kind of resonates as I offer some of my language to it?
So all of it, I would say, definitely that silent stubbornness, because, I'm not really one to be loud, or I would say that I am very confident and firm, but it's in this quiet, gentle way. I'm often described as very gentle, which I love. I think that's a quality that I really love in myself and admire in myself. It's something that I've, especially grown to love as I get a little older and have some more experiences. But I do have this quiet stubbornness. Like if I don't want to do the thing that you are telling me to do, I'm not going to do that thing. And sometimes it's even a thing that I know I would do independently of someone telling me, but it does become like, just because you are telling me I have to do this thing in the way that you are telling me I have to do it, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I found that most recently in my most recent romantic relationship. The person was definitely like a hard eight,
Mm-hmm.
and not that I think that like certain types can't be together, but I think it was like the way that we interacted. He was like very loudly firm with me about certain things, and I would quietly push back until he like I don't know, like broke in a way. It's kind of sad to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I would just like dig my heels in and be like, no, I don't want to do that thing. And then as soon as I would get some space, I would say, you know what? Actually, he's kind of right. I should do that thing. And then I would go do it when it felt like it was my autonomy. It was me making that decision.
Yeah, for sure. When I think even thinking about that 8 and 9 combination, those are two very boundaried numbers, right? And
Mm.
and even, 9, sometimes people will feel like, oh, nine's not boundary because there's so much give and take and there's so much flow. But for the things that really matter, there's a solid wall boundary around them. Like it's you described it as like digging your heels in. Like, this is the hill I will die on, and you will not push me
Yes.
off of this against my will. And so it's in two different ways of stubbornness, right? Because for eights, there's just more intensity and kind of that hyper focus of like, we got to do this now, and get on board with me so we can go do this together now. And for nines, being in that withdrawn stance, you just need a little bit more time. And some of that is to come to the decision on your own. Some of that is to separate from the intensity, of what probably felt like, especially interacting with an 8. But you could have felt that from any other number too, depending on how
Mm-hmm.
passionate or excited they were. And so there's just these combinations at play in your types showing up in different ways. So as you think about the specific piece of wanting, wanting autonomy and knowing this is part of your type structure, if you could kind of wave a magic wand and make it different, what would you want to be true? Like, as you think about, this, does this feel like just a description of your type, or does it feel like a struggle and there's something that you want to be true instead?
Yeah, I think if you had asked me this question maybe 5 years ago, I would have said, no, I love everything about myself, really.
Yeah.
I think I've, especially like growing up, I grew up in a home where I was really encouraged. I grew up like very confident in myself, quiet and shy, but like very sure of myself. But in my more adult years, I think that I have started to learn some of the like snags
Mm-hmm.
of myself, maybe my type, maybe other parts of my personality. So I guess to answer your question, if I could wave a little magic wand, the piece that bugs me and I feel like doesn't like sit well with me when I take a step back is kind of what I described to you, where even if I know that something that someone is pushing for is what's best for me or is what I ultimately want to do, and it is what will lead me closer to my ultimate goals or the life that I'm trying to create for myself. I still feel this really intense digging in of the heels, pushback.
Yeah.
I loved I will die on this hill, because that's a thing that I said many times in my last relationship. But I said it in like, I don't want to die on this hill. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
this is not important in the grand scheme of things. This is not where I'm
Mm.
trying to get. But I find myself battling on this hill for my life. And
Yeah.
I don't want to die here.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, even as you say that, right? It's not the like digging in your heels of like, I will die on this hill, but it's like, I don't want to die on this hill, but it feeling stuck in your type structure. I'm curious,
Mm-hmm.
just as you kind of say that out loud, if there's a sense of a feeling, an emotion that's there for you. Sometimes we even talk about like our felt sense. Like sometimes when we're talking through things, it's almost like a tightness or a heaviness or butterflies in our stomach. So even just like taking a moment to check in of like, I don't want to die on this hill. Like, is there something that's underneath that for you?
Yeah, and I think this is a more recent feeling also. It is a bit of a tightness, but like I don't know, it's almost like I'm trying to like shake off
Yeah.
something. It feels like frustration,
Hmm.
um, which I don't often feel actually.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's kind of a new thing, but I'm frustrated with myself, I think.
Mm. Yeah. Frustrated with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, even as you describe this sensation of like wanting to shake it off. Sometimes there can be this feeling for the body triads of the boundaries are so strong that it's actually constricting you. It's
Hmm.
not just protecting you and keeping someone out. It's almost like the walls get built up too far and too close to you that then you start to feel trapped. And so sometimes there's these moments of frustration because it feels like, gosh, I'm trying to like shake this off, like this boundary, these walls, this command or autonomy, right? Does that resonate as I kind of share that language?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think it's because it's like the most recent experience that I had that like really highlighted this topic for me. But I keep going back to this relationship. And many times we would come together and then, go apart. And every time we would kind of separate, I'd be really sad, really upset, but there would be a moment where usually I'm like walking outside and I have this very physical experience where it feels like the world opens up to me. And
Yeah.
I don't really think, yeah, like partially it had to do with him and definitely the way that we interact. But I think it's mostly from me. Like
Mm.
I'm able to get the space to like let all of this go.
Yeah.
So it is like being in a little tiny room and then
Mm-hmm.
finally being able to walk out.
Yeah. Hmm. So even as you share that and kind of remember this feeling, even for me, because, I, as a human being, have a response to your experience, it almost feels like the spaciousness, as you described, being able
Hmm.
to like walk outside and take a deep breath, almost like this freedom feeling. Does that show up in your felt sense too?
Yeah, absolutely. It is because I've had this sensation multiple times now, and maybe in like the past 2 years. And I do find it's like a very physical sense. Like my hands will open up.
Yeah.
My I'll like it's like a movie moment where my arms go out and I'm
Yeah.
like, I look ridiculous, but it feels like this. It feels like I'm opening up.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and I think too, it's helpful to even have the contrast of the two because in the moment, if someone was watching you have this conversation, with this former partner or and I don't know if you're still together, former partner is the language I was picking up on. Um,
Yeah.
okay. So sorry. I realized I was like, I added that language into what you had
Oh
not
no,
actually
it's still
said.
it's still quite complicated. So, but
Okay,
yeah, I'm gonna say
this
yes, former
partnership,
partner.
this
Yes.
as we're reflecting on this partnership, but almost a sense if someone was watching you, they can't tell what you can feel inside, right? They can't tell that it feels like the walls are closing in, that maybe your fists are clenched, that it feels like you're kind of holding on for dear life, trying
Hmm.
to survive this moment. They can't see that because it is a felt sense, it's an intuitive knowing of your experience, and so as we can name more of what's going on in our experience, that helps us know in the moment and really in the moments leading up to these conversations that are happening, whether it's with this partner in the future or another partner, because there are small moments where we are slowly closing our fists before we ever say the first word to them. These moments sometimes we'll experience them as being anxious about the conversation that's about to happen, or maybe even dreading the conversation, but it's these quiet moments before it feels like you collide in this conflict with the other person, that you're actually slowly experiencing this closing and the walls kind of coming in. And so if you can bring some more awareness to that, especially awareness through the felt sense of like, okay, that feeling that I get of wanting to shake this off, wanting to be able to get free of this. If I check in, even though this is the day before we're going to talk, or this is 2 hours before I drive home from work, then you have some space to actually interact with that emotion, that felt sense, before it is, all the way at the top of the scale, and then it just feels like I have to escape to get out of this. There's more space to kind of slowly metabolize that sensation and to be curious about it too, of like, okay, like I can feel myself, hunkering down. I can feel the walls closing in, and just taking a moment to breathe. It is amazing how much just taking a moment, sometimes even putting your hand on your heart to offer just kind of like some compassion to your experience. But just taking a moment to breathe through that sensation, because oftentimes just noticing it and kind of naming, like it feels like the walls are closing in, can help to dissipate, to metabolize that emotion so that it dissipates, so that it's not so escalated before you ever say the first word or he ever says the first word. So how does that kind of land for you as I share that back?
It sounds wonderful. I do keep thinking like, man, I really struggle with this part.
Yeah.
Like the recognizing as it builds. Like as you're saying it, I can look back on certain experiences like all throughout my life where I know that this was happening like slowly. My jaw is clenched and my hands are clenched, and like my soul is like
Yeah.
clenching up. And I really, like I said before, it doesn't always have to do exclusively with the other person. It's like
Yeah.
a cycle that I get myself into. Like once it starts, it's really hard to get the ball to stop rolling
Yeah.
until I do feel like I have to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the experience that I had in this relationship where it would be, until I burst and I'd be like, I need a break. Like I need to not talk to you for weeks. Like I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Because I do think I have this habit of like freezing, I guess is the most accurate term. Like I just kind of like, yeah, hunker down. I freeze
Yeah.
until that flight kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to be at a really extreme point to have that flight.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
for sure.
I don't know how to not get there. I don't know how to like recognize it
Mm-hmm.
while it's happening.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Some of the practices around being able to recognize it before it becomes this like climactic moment of now I have to get out of here, is just having some rhythms of checking in with yourself, especially when you know a conversation is about to happen. Oftentimes there's this sense of like, hey, we need to talk about this, like, and we're going to talk about it on our date night. We're going to talk about it after work. That's always when we talk about things, or whatever the rhythm is. But in those moments when you know it's coming, to be intentional about even just taking a moment to like have your feet on the floor, kind of wiggle your toes in your shoes. That's a helpful just kind of grounding practice to feel the earth beneath you. And just taking a moment as you breathe to just kind of check different parts of your body. Are you familiar with kind of body scans and some of those guided meditations?
A little bit, yeah, yeah. I've had
Yeah.
some experiences.
Yes. And there's, you can do it on your own, just kind of checking in with different, like start, head going all the way down to your toes. But there's also tons of guided ones. Insight Timer is a really helpful app. It has tons of free meditations that you don't have to pay for. It's just teachers from all over the world that upload things. And so just having some rhythm of kind of checking in, because we get so much into the hustle of life and responsibilities, or some of the, chatter around what's going on in our to-do list, and thinking about all the things, that we are so void of our body, like our sensations and what's going on. And our body is incredibly intuitive. It takes in an incredible amount of information about our surroundings, but it also is incredibly intuitive in what you are feeling about things, and what you want and desire, or what is challenging, or what a boundary, that you're desiring around that. And so just taking some moments to notice like, oh, there's like kind of this rigidity in my jawline. And I know that that is something I typically feel when I'm shooting up really big boundaries, and that's going to cause me to feel really closed in. So like, let's just take a moment and be curious about that. And again, it's amazing how much just naming a sensation, even if you don't have a lot of understanding of why it's there, but just naming
Mhm.
that sensation kind of opens up that path of like, okay, well, what's going on? Or even just like, let's be kind to myself for just a moment to breathe, to, even imagining that air coming in and out of that space that feels rigid, even though, obviously like your air doesn't go into your jaw. But just like imagining that as like a life force and kind of a kindness, just taking that moment. So as I offer that practice back, how does that land for you?
Well, I think it lands well. There are maybe two things that like pop in my head as like the most immediate thoughts. I really like the idea of like touching
Mm,
a spot that is like experiencing something. And
yeah.
I have some experience in bodybuilding, and that's like a
Mm-hmm.
thing that people do. They'll like touch the muscle that they're working on to engage it more because it
Okay.
almost like wakes up. It like makes your brain realize like, oh, this is the thing, this is the part of the body that we're focusing on right now. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like touching my chest when I feel a tightness, that like resonates for me in a way. Because I think just imagining it in my head has always been kind of hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost makes that part of my body feel uncomfortable. But like putting my hand on my chest feels like steadying in a way.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the other thing is like offering, I think I'm quite good at offering myself kindness actually, and
Okay.
a space to think and breathe. But the thought that I had is maybe in these moments where I'm really pushing back on someone, to take a deep breath and offer them some kindness,
Mm-hmm.
and try to piece out, you know, they're very likely not trying to control me. Um, and really like try to remember that and get down to what they are trying to communicate to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Um,
sure. Yeah. And I think even in those moments that, some of this sense in your experience of, kind of becoming more rigid or boundaried, there's also oftentimes for nines this like it will feel like you're getting swept up in the undercurrent of someone else. Like you almost feel like
mhm,
they're, sometimes it's like a good thing of like you're being magnetized towards their energy and that feels like fun and playful and passionate and those pieces. But sometimes that can also feel like you're getting swept up in the undercurrent and it feels very chaotic and out of control. And whether they realize they're doing it or not, right? So they have their own type structure and their own things that are going on, often without their awareness in the moment. And so, even in that, if you can start to notice, like, okay, I feel like I'm getting pulled into their undercurrent, and so and thinking about that, like, at a beach there's an ebb and flow before you ever get pulled under the current, right? There's some sense of like this is a slow gradual walking out into a space where you're getting swept up off your feet. And so even noticing that sensation, and especially with a partner that has some awareness around their type and some language for it, that can be even an easy way to kind of communicate like, hey, I feel like I'm getting like pulled under a little bit. Like I feel like I'm getting swept up in the undercurrent of your excitement, your passion, your anger, your frustration. And so I just need a little bit of like space for me to be able to show up fully present and not just silently stubborn or completely complying to what you want, because the partner doesn't, they don't want either of those things, right? Like if they
mhm.
as we're having this conversation. And so even that can be a helpful like just language to be able to offer, like I need just a little bit of space. Because if you notice that before you've completely gotten turned over and over in the waves of whatever's going on, you won't need so much space. You won't need so much time. You just need a moment to collect yourself, maybe even just an hour or two to collect yourself before you come back into that conversation in a way that's much more honoring of how you wanted to show up, because it's not always a hill that you wanted to die on.
Absolutely. I think that really resonates me, that getting pulled under the like current. I really like that visual. It feels like I'm like a little squishy snail that like, is floating along in that rhythm you're talking about. And then as soon as I get swept up, I like go in my shell. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like the hardening, the walls closing in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it feels it feels very much like what happens.
Yeah, for sure. And part of even like as that picture that we're offering, it's a really chaotic feeling, and I think it's
Hmm.
helpful even just to have some language for it, because not every type feels it that way. Like sometimes in these experiences, it will feel like, gosh, that feels like really big language, or really dramatic language. Like, am I being too sensitive to something, or is this really supposed to be more simple than it is? And the reality is, it's just a different filter for the type 9 structure. Things feel more chaotic than they do to other types. We talk about for the body triad, but specifically for nines, there's almost this feeling of like the too muchness and trying to navigate the too muchness. So, eights fight against the too muchness, ones try to control the too muchness, and nines often hide from the too muchness. And so it's the snail going into its shell, because like the too muchness of the wave is tossing you over. But if you can notice that, sometimes I like to think about things as like the volume gets turned up too much. But before the volume gets, blaring on this too muchness, it's a slow turning up, right? There's this slow moment of like, okay, this is a bit more than, this is a bit too chaotic. This is a bit too messy. This is a bit too much. It's not all the way maxed out at 10 yet. It's like we're getting there. I can feel it. Sometimes there's almost like an anxious, like buzzing sensation, or even like shallow breathing. And so if you can intercept it at the shallow part of it before the volume gets raised too high on it, that gives you some space to kind of maybe take a couple steps back onto the shore so that it's not lapping you up, or even just in that moment to kind of ground yourself and to think through like, okay, how do I want to show up in this space? Is this going to be so much, too much, that I instinctually just hide? And if so, is there a way for me to turn down the volume a little bit, whether that's taking a break, whether that's having a different setting that we talk about this in, whether that's having better boundaries around the way that, or even like terms of engagement of how we talk about things, to help take down some of the chaos and some of the extra noise, that's a part of the details that you're even talking through with a partner.
Hmm.
Yeah. As I share that with you, how does that, I'm curious even if there's like a sense that shows up in your somatic sense. Sometimes people will say like when you talk about the too muchness or the chaos, like they can feel it in their system. I'm curious how it lands for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel very tight. Like there's like a little ball in my chest right now.
Hmm.
Especially because I have been for like a few years now, really in the too muchness.
Yeah.
And I have had, as you're speaking, I realize that I have had some of these experiences of like turning it down. But
Hmm.
it's been a slow learning process.
Yeah.
So maybe like as gradually as it gets turned up, it is like that gradually getting turned down for me. I'm like slowly learning the tools
Hmm.
to navigate those moments where it just feels like, I'm like totally overwhelmed and flooded. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So even in this moment, if you're willing, just taking a moment with some awareness on that tightness on your chest, maybe even just placing your hand there if you're willing to, and just taking a moment to breathe. If it feels more comfortable to have your eyes closed so it doesn't feel like there's so much attention on you. But even just taking a moment and imagining your air coming in specifically to that space and allowing it to dissolve it, to be a breath of fresh air, to be a spacious sensation, and just offering that kindness of the touch. As you take a moment to breathe, I'm curious if anything in that sensation shifts or anything new arises as you kind of just take a moment with awareness on that tightness in your chest, if anything shifts for you.
Yeah, it's like a mini version of that free feeling that we
Yeah.
talked about a little while ago. It's not such like a big body like opening of the arms, but it's like in that space, the my chest where I am, focusing my touch.
Hmm.
Um it's like a small opening. It's
Yeah.
a small freedom.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's helpful to even keep in mind that this resource of offering a kind touch and breathing is in you, right? There's no external thing, even if you are, in a city in buildings all day long and don't have access to nature, to that spaciousness. Like this is a resource that's in you, that's always available to offer yourself, even for just a few breaths, even for just a few moments, as you notice
Mm-hmm.
that the ebb and flow getting closer, and that pull becoming more and more chaotic, or more and more into this overwhelm and this too muchness. Because otherwise what happens is we just get swept up into it, and then often we use the language of freeze, but it's almost this collapse. It's like we play dead and we
Mm.
hide until we can like shake it off and recover. And that's hard, right? That's hard for ourselves. That's hard to restore and to recover. That's hard for our partner, because it feels like you kind of just disappear. If they're not
Mm-hmm.
also leading with type 9, they don't know what's going on always. And so having some gentle ways to be kind to ourselves, and to take a moment, so that the too muchness doesn't cause that collapse. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. As you go into, the next spaces, the next months, the next seasons, this next year, I want to encourage you to find some rhythms of checking in with yourself when things are not going wrong. Just having
Mm.
rhythms of, maybe it's a morning meditation. If you have any kind of like faith tradition, often meditation is always pieces of those, even if it's not exactly your tradition. It's part of the bigger tradition, but it can be tied to the spirituality. It can also be tied just to mindfulness, and being kind and gentle with your body, walking in a mindful way, having a guided meditation, breathing. Because if we can build up more capacity to do those things when everything is okay and calm and peaceful, it's almost like we strengthen that muscle to then do it when the tide is high, and things feel more chaotic, even if it's on a lower level.
Yeah, that instantly felt very hopeful to me. I like hearing you say that, I think like, why didn't I never think of that before? Like check in with myself when things are not going wrong, because I have such a hard time functioning in the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So why not function where I function best?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it feels hopeful.
Yeah. Mm. 30 minutes is never enough time. We could talk lots more, and I'm sure there's other
Absolutely.
pieces that we can go back and revisit too. But I so appreciate you being in the coaching space with me, and being willing to talk through some of these pieces, and even just taking a moment to check in with yourself in this space. It feels like a gift to get to share this moment with you. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope this is not the last time that we are in an Enneagram space together. If as you go on in this journey, you're always welcome to circle back and schedule time for coaching if it feels like a helpful rhythm. Oftentimes, especially for the nines that I coach regularly, sometimes it just feels like there's this sense of choosing to matter. Like this is a helpful way for me to choose to prioritize myself in the way that I want to be, and what feels whole and healthy, and a true calm. And so sometimes even just having a rhythm of coaching is how they choose to take care of themselves. And so if you're ever interested in doing a coaching rhythm with me, I'd love to enter into that space with you. So you just have to reach out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Hey, Enneagram friends. Thanks for listening in to this coaching episode. It's amazing how much we can learn just by hearing someone else process their experience, share what is true for them, and watch that growth and transformation happen as we have these moments that the lights turn on and we see things more clearly, and we have some space to move forward in a way that's more honoring of who we are. My hope, though, is that you will join me in the coaching space. There are many ways that you can do that. On my website, there are 30-minute and 60-minute slots that you can just sign up for. If you need some more information about coaching and you want to have a conversation first, you can also schedule a free 15-minute discovery call to check in and explore how coaching might suit and benefit you in this season of life and the things that you are hoping for and the areas that you feel stuck or discouraged when it comes to your Enneagram type. Okay, friends, till next time.